With possible hot and humid weather conditions during the spring and summer seasons, feedlot managers should always be aware of indications of heat stress among their cattle. Although most cattle are able to handle sub-zero temperatures in the winter, unlike humans, they may have difficulty coping with spring temperatures above 80 degrees Fahrenheit and summer temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. According to Nebraska Extension beef feedlot specialist Galen Erickson, during this kind of weather, it's important to have a strategic heat stress management plan that will provide plenty of water, shade, and airflow for cattle. Market Journal had a chance to talk with Galen Tuesday morning to learn more about how feedlot managers can prevent heat stress among their cattle.
Well, in general, cattle are not very tolerant of heat. They actually handle cold weather better. There are some cattle characteristics that influence heat stress response. And in general, the more energy that they consume, the more heat that they're producing metabolically as well. And so generally speaking, lighter weight cattle, many times cattle that are on a high forage diet will tolerate heat better than finishing cattle. And of course, cattle in our open lots may be exposed to the elements more so than pasture cattle. And so generally speaking, it's bigger, oftentimes fatter cattle because they get fatter towards the end of the feeding period that are the most sensitive to heat stress.
In addition to weight, hair coat color can also impact the chances of heat stress in cattle. We further asked Galen for a few clues that indicate the possibility of heat stress.
So generally speaking, we start worrying about heat stress when the THI, temperature humidity index, gets above 80. So just like us, the more humid it is, and obviously the more hot it is, the more heat stress that can induce. But there are other things that may not be as obvious. Obviously, airflow and wind speed are a major factor, as people can relate to. So we oftentimes calculate, Dr. Terry Mader in his work calculated an adjusted THI, which accounts for wind speed. Solar radiation, it's different on a cloudy day versus a sunny day. And so it isn't just temperature, it's temperature, humidity, and then those other factors. The other thing to keep in mind is what most cattle get stressed from is maybe not the first hot day, but it's a hot day with a very hot, humid night, and then it's the second day of heat that can cause major challenges. And so actually Dr. Mader's work on heat stress suggested nighttime temperatures might be a good predictor of heat stress events.
If overnight temperatures are predicted to remain about 73 degrees Fahrenheit, then feedlot managers should follow a heat stress management plan.
Well, there are numerous things that producers can do to try and help minimize or mitigate some of these stress events. One is if you don't have to work cattle or process them or move them, don't. If you absolutely have to, do as much of that in the evening or nighttime as you possibly can. Secondly, make sure that you understand your airflow in your operations. There are usually some pens that may actually have wind breaks on them, and maybe they're on the north side, and even with south winds that'll minimize airflow in those pens. And so if you can, and move cattle to pens that you know have good airflow. Another mitigation strategy is how much water trough access do they have. The old rule of thumb is 1 inch per head. There's some indications that if we go as high as 3 or 4 or more inches per head capacity on water trough access, that helps mitigate it. Severe cases, you can bring in outside water and give them even more access to water troughs. But the two most common mitigation strategies everybody thinks of are shade and sprinkling, and those are certainly good methods if you have that ability.
Another heat stress factor to evaluate is the delivery of feed for cattle.
So with these heat stress events, we also can at times have erratic consumption patterns in cattle, and so it's oftentimes for feed yards very difficult because we go from hot spells to cool spells, and so fortunately or hopefully we won't have heat stress continuously through the whole summer. And so you also want to be prepared for the cool events and managing how the cattle eat, because once it cools off, oftentimes just like people, they want to eat more and will be more aggressive, and oftentimes that can create some challenges for managing grain consumptions and keeping cattle on feed. So hopefully we'll have a nice summer, but if it does get hot, just make sure you're prepared and you have some type of mitigations in place.
Cattle are a huge concern when it comes to heat stress, but they can only be properly managed if their caretakers also take care of themselves while working in these weather conditions.
It's wise to always make sure everybody stays well hydrated, forcing water consumption every hour, only outside and exposed in sun and to the temperatures for 1 hour times if possible. If you have to do strenuous work, make sure you take breaks. Maybe most important that people forget about is make sure you have 2 people working together in those heat stress events, so that if someone does experience some heat stress or sunstroke type symptoms, such as speech or disoriented, then they have a buddy there that can help them get out of those heat stress conditions and inside.